Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a family.
I got two bananas!
Oh. Okay, I don't want to do this.
But this wasn't just any family. This was a vlogging family.
Good morning, guys. Today we're going to do a day in the life weekend style.
At the center of the household, a loving mother by the name of Myka.
To be perfectly clean, I want it to smell like baked goods with flowers and candles lit. I just want it to be like the perfect fall evening.
Myka Stauffer. She was the loving mother of 5 children: Jacob, Kova, Radley, and Onyx. Hang on a minute. 1, 2, 3. I only named 4.
Yeah. Oh, baby. I love you so much. You're my buddy.
Ah, that's right. We don't do the happily ever afters here. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion. Family. For better and for worse, there is no connection like the one you create with the family. I've discussed this time and time again, so I shan't go into too much depth on my philosophical thoughts on one's kinsfolk. But as you're aware by this point, emotional potential breeds market potential, and the family channel took its place on the YouTube terrain a long time ago. Now, family channels are no stranger to criticism. The extent that some families will go for views often places some of these channels at odds with the rather rigorous standards that audience members impose on such creators. Why do these standards exist? Well, because the children. If you are a parent, many would assert that you have a responsibility to preserve as idyllic a childhood as possible for your offspring, and that degree of responsibility is only amplified when you're uploading content of your family onto a public platform. In spite of this, most criticism is typically confined to parents failing to be adequate role models, not just for their own family, but for others who they are supposed to be educating through their content. Some of these escapades may lead to others asking if these families are equipped properly to even have children. However, it is seldom the parents who are asking that question themselves, or even acting on such an inclination. This is where today's subjects appear to be an exception.
I tell the DJ turn it up.
If she a baby mama,
Go ahead.
she gon'
As the introduction prefaced, this is Myka Stauffer. She is a family vlogger who has been sharing her life with us since 2014. Her husband, James, is a mechanical engineer and runs the channel Stauffer Garage, where he shares some of the work he does and occasionally reacts to poorly looked after vehicles. So it appears that such talent runs in the family. They were wed shortly after the launch of the channel in July 2014, revealing their heartwarming success story in the same month.
He would ramble on for hours, and I would have already fallen asleep on the phone. Like, I never hung it up because I didn't want to be rude. And I was like, I really don't think this guy's gonna be for me because he just rambles and I'm already bored of him on the phone. He just won't stop talking, and
that was after she forced me to talk.
Myka's oldest child, Kova, was born in 2011 to a different partner. She was brought forward onto the blog channel as the resident toddler, and over the following years, Myka built a family alongside her YouTube channel, sharing each step of the way. 2 more children were born in this time, Jacob and Radley, with each pregnancy being documented fairly extensively. 13 weeks, 14 weeks, 15 weeks, 16 weeks, 17 weeks. You get what I'm saying. She'd also promote postnatal well-being, in particular weight loss. A lot of weight loss. In fact, Myka was proud of her lean physique, self-care, and wanted to impart that wisdom upon all of her loyal followers.
I don't just want to have a healthy body and not a healthy mind or a clear headspace. I want to stay positive. I want to be encouraging. I want to be uplifting to you. Like, that's the reason I started my YouTube channel, is to be a positive space and be an uplifting space for you to come and get inspired when you're feeling like you're struggling or you're down.
Over time, she gradually cultivated an audience who were engaged in her day-to-day life. Her views tended to fluctuate a little, but her subscriber base was advancing, and she appeared satisfied with what she had created. After all, she was just a small piece of this family puzzle. I think that's what drew in certain viewers. Myka had found a lane, and even though I personally found it a tad repetitive, rhythm and routine is comforting for many people. In many ways, Myka did everything right. She'd married an eligible bachelor, delivered children who were being raised in a supportive climate, and maintained her own well-being while helping others do the same. She was really living the American dream. But was that enough?
hi guys,
and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 15 baby names that I absolutely love and one baby name that I'm going to be using.
You see, in spite of her accustomed comfort zone, Myka always had a wild side, an edge to her, which may not necessarily correlate with the rest of her image. She aspired for something more in her role as a mother, and perhaps as a creator, and she couldn't just direct all that energy into quirky names like Camden, Remington, Jaeger, and Abercorn. Yes, Abercorn. No judgment, of course. If there are any Abercorns in the comments, be sure to make your presence known. I'm not invalidating you. However, there was one name that stood out from the rest.
For the 12th name that I really like is Huxley. I think this is a really edgy, super modern name.
Yes, Myka was a super modern renegade who had a vision for what her family could be. And after 3 children, she was ready to venture from the security of a suburban white bread world. And on the 6th of July, 2016, our Mrs. Stauffer made the announcement that would change her life forever.
Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today, Jim and I have a very big surprise and secret that we want to share with you guys.
But maybe Dorothy should have stayed in Kansas.
You'll have to find out after we've spoken about rage.
Stop.
Excuse me, I would like to finish the ad, please.
They're not paying me this time.
The people deserve to know.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Out.
It's about my sheer love for the game.
Out. Go. Leave.
Okay, I'll go. True, where's the door handle? Wait.
Come on, Tro, you haven't fed us in 2 days.
I don't see what the fuss is about. The Ayers haven't eaten in weeks, and they've never been better.
Please, just let us go. We'll do anything.
Anything, eh? Well, I suppose I can offer you a way out.
What? Tell us!
All you have to do is listen to this one message. Raycons are the new hottest thing for your ear since I dropped my latest mixtape, Hot Raps and Top Hats. It was founded by Ray J, our upstanding citizen of the century, who has also dabbled in hip-hop, though not quite to my ability. But there's a reason for that, because he has been behind the scenes crafting some of the most cutting-edge premium earbuds that this universe has ever witnessed. I mean, look at this. They just go in your ear, wireless, like that. And if they don't, multiple fits. As life has always taught me, you gotta be prepared for any size. They even come in this nice rechargeable case, which give your earbuds newfound power. It's like some sort of magic. Ray J is basically a sorcerer, the Harry Potter of premium earbuds. When I put them in, I feel like a different person. Wait, that is a different person. Give my earbuds back, you prick. There are so many colors, from blue to red to black to red to blue. My favorite is red. It matches with the blood of my enemies. And it's not just me that is going ballistic. Insane. Snoop Dogg, Mike Tyson, and Rich the Kid are all losing their minds over this brand. Full-grown adults obsessing. This is madness. Well, apart from Rich, I suppose, though. He does look quite mature for a child. Raycons basically do anything. Well, they won't cook your dinner, but you can listen to them while you cook your dinner. Just don't leave that oven on. Crap. There goes the house. 3rd one this month. But just put on your talking heads and you have some real ambience. To perfect that ambience, be sure to use the everyday E25s. 6 hours of play, Bluetooth pairing, a more compact design. Ray J, the absolute madman. Why? Why did you do that, Ray J? That model also has some decent reviews as well. So there's that. And now Ray is telling me he wants a big, huge, massive, gargantuan 15% off if you click the link in the description below. buyraycon.com/tro. That's buyraycon.com/tro. Bish, bash, bosh. Now I know why everybody loves Raymond. Well, I did say it was a way out. Now, back to the video.
There has been something that we have been
Hiding for about a month
and we're really just so blessed and so excited to share with you guys. Jim and I have decided that
We're gonna adopt
from China. We are going to be adopting a little boy from China. We haven't officially formally started the process yet, and we do plan on taking y'all with us through the journey and all of the steps along the way.
Yes, it was in this video the couple announced their intentions to adopt, with the name being decided shortly after. As some of you may be intending to look it up, this was the one mentioned earlier in the naming video, not Abercorn, I'll add, but I shan't be mentioning the name further. The Stauffers seemed optimistic about their choice and in the coming year traveled to China to find their new son. This adoption was in part supported by a GoFundMe, which was meant to contribute to the costly process that such a task can give rise to. Adoption is no easy venture. It shouldn't be like window shopping for a new child. Even at a young age, many orphans face acute developmental challenges brought on by the often turbulent environments and lack of secure attachment figures that come with it. With this in mind, there is a lot of respect for those who choose to undertake such an endeavor and provide a child with the joyful youth that they deserve. However, they must also be well prepared, and most of Myka's preparation appeared to amount to reading inspirational quotes.
Like I said, more than anything, this is our boy, and we don't need to consult with any more physicians until I bring this little guy home. He's our son, and that's that. He's not we aren't gonna trade him in, we're not gonna return him. He's our boy.
Now, I jest to an extent. I cannot say exactly what happened behind the scenes when it came to Myka's planning. However, the way she presented it on her channel may raise a few questions in hindsight.
We sent off our imaging to our physician that's kind of been on board with Haley. She's been reviewing the file. She's been very optimistic about this little boy. She's like, I don't see anything wrong with him. He looks perfect to me. And then when she got the imaging, her optimism went down significantly. And it's nothing against this physician, you know, she's just listening to what other doctors, other neurosurgeons and neurodevelopment specialists are telling her. But her prognosis and everything for our son just went drastic. She kind of almost discouraged us from adopting him, like saying that this is going to be severe, this is going to be a lot.
There were clearly people around Myka who harbored doubts about the feasibility of the family's ambitions. Nonetheless, this did not faze them, and towards the end of 2017, they uploaded a series of videos which followed them on their adoption journey. Many of these videos were uploaded onto their second channel, the Stauffer Life, whose presence has been completely expunged from the internet, for reasons that we will discuss in due course.
So what we did is we took his CT scans to our second physician, because we had two doctors on board reviewing our son's file. And that doctor gave us a much better thought process. He said, you know what she said could be very well true, but look at the videos on this little guy. He is developmentally on track. He is talking, he is walking, he's throwing balls, he's climbing furniture, he's acting, he's walking and talking like a normal 1-year-old and doing things that are beyond his developmental schedule. So be aware that that little brain may be compensating more than we realize, and maybe he's just doing just fine.
However, back to China. All necessary arrangements to ensure a smooth and straightforward adoption have been put in place, with Myka and her husband traveling out to the adoption clinic where they proceeded to meet prospective candidates for their nurturing family. One individual rose above the competition. Yes, a child that upon encountering, Myka just knew was the one that she had a connection with like no other. And when she felt that, she decided to act on her intuition and finalize this process.
I actually got to see him prior to meeting him, and when I saw him, I just lost it. I cried so hard. My heart couldn't quit beating. It was just one of those feelings where you just know, and it was just the craziest feeling that I've ever felt in my entire life, which is really, really cool.
As well as being covered on their second channel, many of the adoption stages were broadcast on Myka's main account as well, even receiving its own specialized playlist. She was clearly very proud of this achievement, and the video of the adoption day would go on to obtain over 5 million views. In these videos, Myka would present herself as this resolute, uncompromising mother who would never rest on her laurels or have her commitment to her new son worn down.
If anything, my child is not returnable. So when I heard all of the things that doctor was telling us, it kind of went in one ear and out the other. I wasn't in a state of denial. I accepted and took on everything that she said. And I sat down with Jim. I said, you know, worst case situation, if our little boy at one point in his life, he needed to be in a wheelchair and he needed full on care, would you still love him? And we, without a doubt in our minds, we knew no matter what state he came to us, that we would love him.
It's a very stirring sentiment and one that would be reiterated over the coming years, in YouTube videos, social media posts, and even in interviews. Myka was now not only a health-conscious, hard-working mother, but she had used her influence to give back to someone much less fortunate. There was no price that you could put on such an opportunity, and the channel always presented the perception that this was mutual gratitude, because that's the sort of person that Myka was. Even when she was giving back, she was learning so much, and she was ready to learn more.
I can definitely say that I'm a better mom today, and I can't wait to see the lessons that he teaches me. Why am I crying? I can't wait to see some of the lessons that he teaches me many years from now. But I just want to tell him, if he ever watches this, thank you. I wouldn't take back any of those hard days or any of those moments, because they've taught me so much, and I just pray to be an amazing mom to him and just take the best care of my family as I humanly possibly can.
However, some lessons are harder than others. You see, their new son was a greater challenge than one had anticipated, because according to Myka, the Chinese adoption center's experts had misdiagnosed him. In fact, in an interview with The Bump, Myka stated that the adoption agency had commented that he suffered from a small brain tumor. This should not have affected his cognitive ability. However, they observed behaviors which they couldn't explain, such as biting, pinching, and banging his head against a wall. The couple observed that he must have been more developmentally challenged than they had initially assumed, and after multiple consultations, it was revealed that the child had actually experienced a stroke while in utero, and this was stifling his mental faculty. Originally, it was thought that this setback was only temporary, and that the Stauffer's new son would easily catch up with his peers over time. However, this was not the case, and after a series of further evaluations through an expensive health system, the son in question was diagnosed with level 3 autism. This is the most serious diagnosis on the spectrum, and a person suffering from it will face serious challenges in social interaction. It is also noted that they will require high levels of support to help them manage their condition. In this 2019 article, Myka reflects on the diagnosis and states that after a period of introspection, she realized the problem wasn't with her son, but with herself, and that this affliction, although challenging, only served to illuminate the beauty of life. To quote, "He taught me to quit giving a damn what other people think. When people stare at you and judge your parenting skills, you have to learn to let those horrible looks and mean words roll right off your shoulder. Parenting a child with autism looks very different, and people don't know how to perceive that. To be frank, they don't have to understand. All that matters is that we're doing the best for our family. We still have hard days, I still seek guidance and ask for help, and sometimes I still break down in tears. But the one thing I know for sure is that our son doesn't go a day without being endlessly loved. Adoption is love. It takes a lot of grit, sweat and tears, but it's so worth it in the end. Even if your ending looks different than you had planned, just remember, different isn't a bad thing." This was Myka's philosophy, and one that she continued to advocate for right up to 2020.
This year has been so amazing to kind of affirm those questions in my head and let me know that, like, I am fighting the right fight. I am doing what is best for my kiddo. There's so many days that I'm just so grateful that I got the opportunity to get to be your mama. And Huxley is my son through and through. He's my baby boy, and I am so glad that he is part of our family. I couldn't do my day without him.
So, what changed? Myka was a content creator. When she found a formula that people enjoyed, she would deliver it again and again and again. And that truth was no different to the content she released with her adopted son.
I'm so grateful, so blessed, and so thankful all at the same time. Just because things are hard doesn't mean they're bad. It just means it takes a lot of work. And one day I'll be so grateful for all the hard work and all the time and all the energy we put into our baby.
She was an individual who wanted to present herself as the embodiment of the can-do mindset. She may face hurdles, but she was braced for them, and she was ready for the difference that she would make through overcoming them. Many creators, particularly vloggers, present their content as this journey, and we will see them hit a milestone, and it will feel good. It provides the impression of progress. It's what reels in a lot of audiences, and with Myka's son, there was an opportunity to show more than the basic developmental breakthroughs. In the years following the adoption, in spite of the challenges, Myka documented many of these milestones that her son reached. People tuned in for this, providing the mother with a consistent level of growth. However, this was also a troublesome formula. As a vlogger, you choose how much of your life is presented. It's a nice privilege. However, at the same time, this presentation also has a bearing on how you are perceived. Myka chose to depict her life in a way that painted the environment as challenging yet manageable, with the occasional inspirational speech about how she was going to pull through, the sort of person who would never give up. So the worst thing that she could do in any circumstance is to give up. To many, she would not only be betraying her adopted son, but she would be betraying the spirit that she had constantly promoted on her channel and compromise her own mantra. How could you do that? Well, let's move to the present year. Now, the start of 2020 is where the schedule becomes a bit murky, mainly because no one was particularly concerned with what Myka Stauffer was doing. She continued to upload content about her family, nothing particularly new. However, there was an increasing absence of the son of interest. Myka had given birth to a new child named Onyx the year before, and in January they took their newborn on a vacation to Bali, implying that the other children had been left at home. The last public statement made regarding his well-being prior to this fateful video was released in February. This post appeared to divulge difficulties regarding coping with their child's temperamental nature. Following that post, the son ceased to make appearances on the family's social media, with both Jim and Myka making comments alluding to adversity in their lives. However, as they were not specific, there was little people could deduce from it. Nonetheless, as time passed, people became increasingly suspicious as to their child's whereabouts and began to apply pressure onto the couple. Users began to speculate in forums and in the comment sections of the Stauffers' social media, shedding further light onto the unanswered question. People started constructing hypotheses as to what exactly happened to their young'un, and these rumors were only going to gather momentum if left unaddressed. After all, he is your son. So on the 26th of May, the Stauffers decided to set the record straight and provide people with an update on their family.
So this is by far the hardest video James and I have ever publicly had to make.
How do you break bad news? It's a tough one, especially when that news is equally bad news for yourself. And make no mistake, this was an awful scenario for Myka to find herself in. Not only was she going to undermine the tons of rhetoric she had espoused, she had to explain why. This was obviously an upsetting decision for any family to enact, and must have been made with a heavy heart. Therefore, it was understandably a difficult subject for them to speak about. However, at the same time, this decision was clearly one taken with great deliberation, and the Stauffers can take all the time they need to justify it in a way that makes sense. They had ample time to prepare an explanation that was empathetic to people's inevitable objections, but still made sense of the dilemma that they had been placed in. Did they manage that? Well, let's discuss the content of the video first. Myka opens by thanking her amazing viewers for respecting their son's privacy, which apparently helped her through some really hard times, before becoming surprisingly emotional very quickly.
We have some viewers who have been just like so incredibly kind and respectful of our son's privacy. I just want to say thank you. Like, that really got me through some really hard times, and I just want to say thanks. Like, you have no idea what that means to me, and some of the special messages that you've sent. Like, just thank you from the bottom of my heart.
James then cuts in, well, he's cut in, paying tribute to Myka's character, informing everyone how hard she has tried throughout this whole situation before going into the details of the situation. As stated elsewhere, the seriousness of their son's condition wasn't understood until he was back in the US, and although he had been receiving therapy, the issue appears to have not resolved itself. In fact, the treatment has only intensified in the last year, and the prognosis from professionals was clearly not optimistic. This upsets James to the point where he becomes emotional, once again emphasizing how much they have tried. Myka tag teams in and rephrases James's comment.
There's not an ounce of our body that doesn't love you with all of our being. There wasn't a minute that I didn't try our hardest, and I think what Jim's trying to say is that after multiple assessments, after multiple evaluations, numerous medical professionals have felt that he needed a different fit and that his medical needs, he needed more.
They then bring up why they haven't spoken about this situation prior. According to them, they were trying to protect their son's privacy and wanted to avoid any legal ramifications, which appears to be quite an emotional topic for Myka once again.
And that's why, like, on Instagram and stuff, I've tried to like let you know as little as I could, but I couldn't tell you anymore because I anything up.
This is followed by the couple repeating this, before elaborating on the nature of their content and indirectly responding to some of the criticism that they had been receiving, which admittedly seemed a bit off-key for a video on such a topic, but I suppose I can see the loose connection.
Worse, it's not about me at all, but it's just like this journey has been, the last couple months have been like the hardest thing I could have ever imagined choosing to do, because ultimately, after pouring our guts and our heart into this little boy.
But what did the criticism in question ensue? Well, let's talk about that.
Anything that happened in the home that was hard for, that's not fair for me to put out there publicly. That's his privacy. So we're not going to talk about that. That's not appropriate. And that'll never be appropriate.
As we've observed throughout this video, Myka was always one to display many aspects of her life, even ones that most families would consider invasive. This was not out of the ordinary for the genre. However, there are further conditions which many would argue make Myka's handling in her videos exploitive. First of all, her son's condition. In spite of my personal reservations, most people aren't looking to topple the whole family vlogging scene. However, when you're dealing with a child with an already fragile background, sticking him in front of a camera can be questionable, especially if his affliction affects his ability to signal consent, something which many would argue is already limited in a young child. Secondly, Myka's approach to content creation. I spoke about the repetitive nature of her videos, and with many topics, that could be perceived as a person returning to the source of success. However, when the source of success is a topic more sensitive, particularly when that story isn't your own, returning to it in a way that may seem excessive could draw in criticism. Myka didn't just regularly talk about the topic of adoption on her channel. She also participated in promotions, even integrating them into portrayals of her relationship with her son. In this Instagram post, she talks about how she wouldn't trade her son for anything. Sponsored by Dreft. And last, but far from least, the context that such a decision would shine on Myka's previous statements and actions. The mother-son loyalty was a regular selling point for the channel, and people began to hypothesize that Myka was only interested in having an adopted son for as long as it was profitable, and the fact that this was no longer the case meant that she had decided to give him up, in spite of all the inspirational detergent-sponsored rhetoric. To summarize, these detractors believed that Myka Stauffer had capitalized on the profitability of such a topic when it suited her, and threw in the towel when the costs outweighed the benefits. This is quite a serious theory, and in many ways it was understandable that the Stauffers wanted to set the record straight. However, I'll add that these hypotheses were not particularly popular at the time, especially given that people weren't sure as to the child's location. Their primary priority should have been to clear up any ambiguity regarding their son's whereabouts, but they can't seem to resist the temptation to explain and justify themselves.
I didn't adopt a little boy to share these things publicly.
What you're left with is this very awkward video, which only worsens as it goes on. It feels like they are more interested in justifying themselves, but when your justification amounts to the appeal to knowledge that the audience doesn't have access to, then you have to rely on their trust in your own authority, which clearly didn't work with Myka and Jimothy here.
Every now and then you may have gotten like a teeny struggle or a hardship when I was trying to be really raw and real, but we haven't intentionally.
The video was designed for their own audience, people who were going to innately trust what the Stauffers said. However, it didn't take more than a couple days for this video to begin circulating outside the fanbase, and for it to attract the attention of more skeptical viewers who found their explanations rather unsatisfactory.
95% of the struggles we have never publicly aired, ever.
99? 95? What's the difference? The video plays out like a half-baked lawyer statement read by a second-rate theatre actor. It feels like they're trying to convey emotion while dancing around any details that may actually implicate them, essentially using tears as a shield to evade further challenges to their character. They do compose themselves a bit more towards the end, but at this point it was rather futile, and they still continue to attempt to justify their now clearly slanted portrayal.
We may come on socials, for my channel, the reason I started my channel is to be positive and to bring people positivity, even though we're struggling and that when we talk about hugs, it's a huge wound for us. Just because I may be positive on my stories or be having fun, doing something fun, doesn't mean that I'm not still horribly hurting, and the same for Jim.
It's obvious they're quite aware of how this revelation comes into conflict with a majority of their timeline. So Myka has done her best to explain this away, and it's not like I would be particularly angry at the fact that they were previously hopeful and optimistic, and that forecast has since changed. Changes happen, and our expectations may be subverted. However, their explanation just makes it worse.
With pure intent of respecting his privacy, not to give you a fake facade or to be lack of transparency, but to respect our son's privacy. And this is all that we're okay with sharing.
Because what Myka's explanation here implies is that these challenges were apparent from ages back and that they just chose not to broadcast them out of respect for their son's privacy, which seems all well and good, but at the same time, why would you consciously promote an attitude or perception that was at odds with the reality? It's important to remember that your content may have a great influence on the decision that audience members make with regards to adopting, and omitting such details will deceive people, whether you intend to or not. On top of this, given the degree of coverage Myka provided to the adoption journey and the post-adoption life, the defense of privacy was hard for many to buy, particularly given the fact that many of these videos were still public at the time of this somber upload. This once again made these comments feel like they were using the privacy card to deflect criticism, implying that anyone who decided to cover these antics from here on out would be disrespecting their son, despite them being the ones who uploaded the original content. The Stauffers obviously anticipated the incoming criticism and questions that they would face. However, in attempting to prematurely respond to them, they drew more attention towards the lack of consistency within their justifications, and in turn only appeared to give further credence to the unforgiving theory surrounding their conduct and catalyzing a tidal wave of backlash, focused on exposing the Stauffers and their substandard parenting skills. Let's talk about that then. If Myka had made a video talking about the rehoming of her son, she could have outlined basic, non-invasive details before conveying remorse about the possible misrepresentation that her content had conveyed, while committing to protecting his privacy from here on out. That would have at least curbed some of the criticism. Unfortunately, she decided to give us this instead.
Thank you for everything, and we just really appreciate all of your support and kindness, but just please respect our privacy.
And respect his too.
The Stauffers video was like a challenge to the internet, and those resident were more than willing to take up the couple on their claims that this was all a privacy issue and that they had really tried their hardest. As noted, when this video was first released, Myka still had her videos about the adoption process public and fully monetized. This became a source of criticism in the first few days where these uploads remained visible, with a petition demanding the removal of them obtaining over 150,000 signatures. It didn't take too long for the Stauffers to respond by privating nearly all their content involving their adopted son around the turn of June. This may have quelled the criticism if it was the sole talking point. However, in leaving the content accessible, Myka and her husband also left it prone to deeper analysis that would kick up a bit of a buzz. A sort of hornet's nest buzz.
If anything, my child is not returnable.
Clips like the ones I briefly touched on earlier were circulating on the more moderate end of the criticisms, mostly with the purpose of emphasizing the Stauffers' convenient disregard for professional advice in the past, which seems somewhat ironic given how heavily it is referenced in the new video. It's unclear exactly when this U-turn happened, and although I'm sure people are pleased that Myka was actually listening, some found it a bit too well timed to their liking. Other people went straight for the fabric of the Stauffers' narrative, particularly regarding how much they hadn't shown.
No more. Come on, let's go. You're not gonna throw a fit when you don't get your way. That's not okay. Let's go. Are you done fitting? Are you done? Are you all done?
Now, Myka sent the audience mixed signals when she strangely decided to alter 99 to 95%, almost as if she was attempting to calculate it herself. However, what did that hypothetical 5% entail?
It's been crazy, so it's nice for everyone to start getting back on schedule. What'd you do?
I just did a thing.
See? You look like Ruka. You gave him a Ruka cut.
Was he like 5 million times cuter? Oh my gosh, there's still hair all over the kid. Like, he was mad. He was like, we're not doing this.
Right. While although not always captured in the highest definition, many people archived uploaded clips where these Stauffers behaved in ways that appeared unbecoming of them as parents, particularly given the status of their son. This included a lot of filming that one may consider invasive, particularly when he appeared to be in distress. The aforementioned clip coming from a video where they shaved his head. However, this was far from the only incriminating recording, and the existence of multiple examples began to circulate and depict a pattern of behavior which was less than flattering.
Did you have fun getting candy, big man?
He has had multiple meltdowns.
You're not having a good day today.
I never tell you guys the truth. And that's why you don't see how in the vlog. He's probably having a meltdown. Are you done?
He's just having a bad day. He's a grumpy day today.
In this rather unnerving video, Myka seems to shame her son with all the swagger of Cruella de Vil meets Wine Mum. All the things you wish you knew about my little boy, but we don't talk about that. I'm not entirely sure the exact date of this post, but once again, it didn't seem to fit in line with the mother who tried her hardest point of view. On the one hand, I am willing to understand that it would have been confusing and frustrating when their adopted son was first brought home and behaved in ways that challenged the family's preconditioned views of what raising a child would be like. But there is a line, and too much of this content was already crossing it, and they should have known better by then, and many people believe they did.
What are you doing in there, man? You reorganizing the shoe closet for me, eh? Just a silly boy, huh?
The most worrisome of videos was this one, where James Stauffer appears to discover their son in the closet with duct tape around his wrist. The implication here being that Myka applied the duct tape to prevent their son from sucking his thumb, with critics branding it as reckless and hypocritical, particularly given that another one of their biological children was also caught sucking their thumb, and Myka didn't appear to react to that at all. With all this in mind, many people's outlook on Myka's motives became even more pessimistic, with the idea that she was actually harboring resentment for her son and was channeling frustration into punitive measures.
We are having meltdowns because we've already had breakfast and we just want to keep eating and it's not time to eat. So we're gonna sit down. Sit down. We have to wait. You can have a snack. I don't have a problem giving him as much food as he wants. It's more principle. It's about we don't just throw fits to get our way, so we're trying to work through that.
Another user found what appeared to be screenshots of Myka posting onto a Facebook group, stating that she was considering adopting once more, but looking for something more low maintenance. There is also a statement where she seems bothered by the fact that her son has a way of looking at people every time he eats. According to her, it drives the husband bonkers. It really was a tough time for the Stauffers. The most allegedly telling post here is the one where Myka asked what learning difficulties most would consider challenging, but that members of the adoption group would consider easy, implying once more that she was only concerned with how an adopted child might be perceived by the audience. This only brought their motives into further contention when it came to the adoption process. People also found a comment of her stating that her son wanted this, despite the many documented communication issues that he has. It was also alleged that given their trip to Bali, the Stauffers made their decision to give up the son in January and taken the holiday once he had gone. Although this is an intriguing theory, I do believe other videos around that time did show the son still in the household. Regardless, people no longer trusted Myka to be honest in her videos when talking about this issue. Much of the additional context not only contradicted her narrative, but brought into question the entire chronology of her channel, with the implication that she was more interested in how she could milk her son's adoption journey financially than she was in her son's well-being. It was not a favorable portrait, and as the pressure mounted, Myka began to face the consequences. There are plenty of ways that one can sustain public criticism. However, today's condemnation was mostly promulgated from within the Twitter sphere, which I typically feel quite ambivalent about. Twitter is probably one of the platforms most susceptible to mob mentality, and I'm not a fan of mob mentality. It's very easy to select parts of a story which are the most emotionally rousing and presented in a way that is tailored towards receiving public recognition rather than representing a fair perspective. However, with this in mind, it was hard for many to see the Stauffer side at all. They were choosing not to defend themselves further, and even without commentary, their actions had spoken for themselves. So many users set their sights on those associated with the Stauffers, most notably the brands. And brands are notoriously vulnerable to negative publicity. You saw it recently with G Fuel and Keemstar, a person universally renowned for controversy losing their support because suddenly people decide to specifically target that relationship. Brands seem to care less about what people have actually done and more about how many people complain. In her stint online, Myka had accumulated an impressive entourage of sponsors, including one she had used her adopted son to promote. I already mentioned the Dreft sponsorship, but another quote from a video had her directly crediting the fabric softener for enhancing their bond. How the last time that they had worked together was 2018, so clearly the lack of Dreft's presence in the relationship had put a strain on the family. Dreft themselves did leave a comment in peak centrist form, stating that it was a sad and difficult situation for everyone involved. Thank you, Dreft, for that insightful contribution. However, they did emphasize they were not working with the Stauffers, while also implying they would not be working with them in the future. Other brands were also fast to distance themselves from the mother of four, including Huggies, Mattel, Danimals, and Chili's. However, the most blunt severance came from Kate Hudson's brand Fabletics, who had previously worked with Myka. Upon being notified of the situation, Hudson informed an Instagram user that Stauffer had been terminated. A rather definite stance. Although it became clear at the time that most brands were not working with Myka nor considering it, this sort of public pressure will likely follow through to prospective deals in the future, tearing a pretty gaping hole into the channel's potential for coming sponsorships. Nonetheless, some still felt that this was not sufficient retribution for Myka's actions, particularly given some of the clips, and decided to take it one step further. What do I mean exactly? Well, in their video breaking the news, the Stauffers disclosed that they didn't put their son through the system. In fact, they, quote, hand-picked out a new forever family for him, which at least should inspire some confidence.
And they found somebody that they felt would be ultimately the best fit, and he is thriving. He is very happy. He's doing really well, and his new mommy has medical professional training, and it is a very good fit.
To build onto this faith, the lawyers, the people who definitely don't have any vested interest at all, came forward to say what great people the Stauffers were as well, highlighting their caring and thoughtful nature. To be honest, their message told the same story. There was just less crying, which was appreciated, but certainly not all vindicating. And unfortunately, as people's questions about the Stauffers' conduct persisted, many began to inquire about the adopted son and if he was really in safe hands. Combine this with the already damning footage being collated online, and with enough reports, law enforcement were compelled into opening a case on the couple. Now, I think most people didn't expect anything to come of this because there was nothing abjectly criminal, just some pretty subpar parenting. But people presented the complaints and the authorities pursued it accordingly. The first task was to locate the child. This was more of a challenge than it initially seemed because the Stauffers didn't go through any state systems which would keep records of the child's whereabouts. In an interview with the sheriff's office, they stated they were working with multiple agencies to pinpoint the two-time adoptee's residence. This provoked numerous news outlets and creators to run the story that the child had been lost, making some wonder if something more sinister was afoot. Fortunately, he was located, and in a statement shortly after, the police stated that they were confident that the Stauffers had followed the appropriate adoption measures, but were still investigating any alleged wrongdoing and touching base with all parties involved. I would assume this investigation lasted throughout June, with the Stauffers likely remaining silent due to the ongoing case, though they did still find the time to remove their update video after it accrued over 5 million views. Towards the end of the month, Myka would put out a post on her Instagram, first apologizing unreservedly for all the hurt she caused and admitting she was ill-prepared for the adoption, opening up about her shortcomings in the adoption process and conceding that she was naive, foolish, and arrogant. She finishes by addressing a couple of external allegations, averring that she did not adopt a son to gain wealth, and in fact asserting that they invested a lot of money back into his care. She also affirms that they are not under any investigation, which is slightly confusing given that a few days later, the Delaware County Sheriff's Office released a statement announcing the completion of their, quote, investigation. But I'm going to assume Myka doesn't believe her audience are that stupid and chalk it up to a terminological oversight. Either way, both parties conclude that no egregious malpractice has occurred, and that everyone is where they should be. We should at least provide some solace to those concerned. Myka's post has received over 14,000 likes, with messages of support from those within the community. However, she has heavily filtered the comments, which means it's hard to discern a consensus on the post. Conversely, the sheriff's office's statement is open to all, leading some to express their disappointment and frustration at the lack of further action in the comment section, with some stating that in spite of the office's supposedly in-depth report, key details have been overlooked, which may implicate the Stauffers even more than they had been previously. Let's discuss that. Now, anyone should be able to request an instant review from the sheriff's office, which I did and subsequently received. There are multiple redactions for obvious reasons, and these can sometimes affect the sentence flow, but I'll do my best to relay the information back regardless. Before we go into the more contentious details, I think it's worth noting that the report found that the son had assimilated well into his new family, and when monitoring his current health, appeared to be in a happy and supportive environment, which I hope we can all rejoice over, regardless of your opinion on the former parents. Speaking of whom, we're at the center of this very curious case.
It's crazy how you can grow so much in such a little amount of time. I'm definitely not who I was when we first started YouTube. No.
As expected, the report was unable to tell anyone too much about the adoption process other than it was legal and that the new family had received sufficient background checks, which was fine. I don't think there's too much that people need to know there. There were minor disputes such as Myka's reference to fundraising, where she discusses the GoFundMe, but not other methods such as the 1,000-piece puzzle of their son, though I'm sure if that was brought up she would have an explanation at hand. No, what was more interesting were the explanations pertaining to their decision in dissolving this adoption. Myka and perhaps James, I don't know, specific names have been redacted in this instance, frame their now departed son as being physically aggressive towards his other siblings in the household. They state that they had multiple carers quit on them due to his behavior and eventually had to hire a full-time employee just to keep their children safe, which was very costly. They said multiple family members couldn't handle him, and there have been numerous evaluations supporting the position that the son's place in the household was no longer tenable. They also state they have video footage to support their comments with regards to his behavior. They state that although their biological offspring are now safe, one son will be needing therapy for what he endured, and another daughter commented about how she now feels safer without their adopted son under their roof. It appears that safety and cost were the two issues at the heart of this matter, and you can't often have one without the other. Another specific instance of these two themes surfacing was the thumb incident. You know, the clip where he had duct tape around his hand. Well, Myka had an explanation for that as well. It appears the child was compulsively sucking his thumb to the point where he would start to develop blisters. His therapist had recommended a thumb guard. However, he ripped off the one he had initially been provided with. So Myka, in what she admits was a bad judgment call, instead of replacing it, decides to go full DIY and use duct tape to keep it on. Though she does stress this was a one-off. Thank God for that. There are still some unanswered questions though.
We just pop it out of his mouth and kind of distract him, but his is a little bit different for comfort.
It's a little bit different. It makes him happy.
And the thumb guard never worked.
Yeah, thumb guard for never worked.
Because he was so smart.
He was either really mad or he pulled it off.
No, he always figured out how to pull it off.
Pulled it off, but usually was very mad before that.
If he didn't figure it out right away. Yeah.
So it was just one of those things where it was just let it go. Get them talking first and kind of work with them and let them have that comfort for a little while, right?
Many people with experience in this area don't dispute the possibility the reported behavior from the child in question was present, particularly one who was on the spectrum. However, people did take issue with the framing, which presented the son as an instigator or an aggressor. If you keep in mind the youngster was now in another household where he is reported to be completely happy, some felt there must have been certain conditions that had precipitated his outbursts. On top of this, many felt there were circumstantial details which didn't appear compatible with the Stauffers' narrative. For example, the Bali trip that the Stauffers took in January. This already seemed like a questionable idea given the alleged circumstances by the parents, but many observed that in the video prior to their departure, the son appears to be freely roaming the house without causing the panic that the parents had recounted.
Another thing he loves is wrestling on the floor with dad. He will instigate him in the evening to try to get him to wrestle him or like roughhouse, which trust me, my other son is obsessed with too. But that is one thing that he loves to do.
On top of this, many argue that the financial reasoning didn't stand up given how the Stauffers purchased a new house, took multiple holidays, and indulged in luxury items, such as what is alleged to be a Cartier bracelet, spotted while she was ironically lamenting their son's therapy costs. Some people also point out the Stauffers' refusal to share certain records regarding their adopted son with the police, though I assume in that instance they were acting on the advice of their lawyers, so little can be taken there.
As far as his personality goes, he is the cuddliest, most energetic, funnest, giggly little guy ever. He is strong-willed. He knows exactly what he wants. And I love that about him. One thing I love about him, no matter who is having like the worst day in the world, if he comes and smiles at you or giggles, everybody smiles.
In another interview published in September 2019, just after the child had turned 4, Myka appears to convey the message that as a child he was relatively low maintenance. To quote, "He is a great kid, and his condition doesn't involve that much overall care. All you need is a big heart and practice patience every day. It's a different kind of patience. He does receive 30 hours of ABA, applied behavior analysis, in-home therapy a week, and goes to private preschool to help reach his highest potential. If the adoption was dissolved at latest May, this provides an almost non-existent window of time for the child's behavior to regress in the way that Myka claimed it did, particularly without any clear stimulus at all. Many brought attention to the numerous changes that the son had endured, including moving house, school enrollment, vacations, all that may provoke an adverse response from someone on the spectrum, yet didn't seem to.
His first time ever in Florida.
He's probably living the dream.
There are a lot of people who are understandably frustrated at the police's conclusion, but I can't say I'm surprised that no further action was taken, although there are very legitimate qualms with certain decisions made by the family, which we'll discuss soon. I couldn't see a state prosecutor taking the case as it was, especially as law enforcement seemed to perceive it. If you assume the courts would err on the side of caution, then a lot of it would be defended as misdirected attempts to establish authority or as under pressure rash decision-making, rather than a pattern of malicious misdeeds. I'm not entirely sure a court case would have really settled any outstanding gripes either. The Stauffers are still parents to 4 children, and although that shouldn't affect legal liability logically speaking, I think an extended legal procedure may just place further stress on the remaining children, and I don't think anyone really wants that. You may even have to involve a child who everyone seems so concerned about. It all seems a bit too much trouble. In spite of this, I understand that the inconsistencies probably leave people rather dissatisfied, and although you can accept that there are details which we will never know, and we don't have to know, I think it'd be nice to arbitrate some truth from an ordeal filled with so many conflicting messages.
I don't know about you guys, but it's just like the craziest thing. Like every day it starts to hit me like he's my real son. Like he had a foster mom and he had a real mom at one time, and they were amazing parts of his life, but it's so crazy to think that like I'm his only real, like, I'm his mom.
Myka's detractors frame her as self-interested, self-serving, and self-gratifying, using an adoptee to further her own online image and fuel a white savior complex, whereas those more sympathetic may see her as a victim of her own romanticist perceptions of what adopting a child would ensue, trying to withstand the inevitable failure. Was this a mother who adopted a son for the purpose of profit, or was she just an idealist in way over her head? Consumerist or fantasist? Well, let's take one more look. Myka Stauffer made a series of awful decisions. There is little debate over that. She should have listened to expert advice all those years ago when they told her that this was not a good idea. Yet she didn't. So here we are today. Regardless of the truth surrounding their son, as adults, they ultimately bear that responsibility.
It's hurt. Like I remember like praying to God saying like, I trusted you so much and like you gave me a little bit more than I knew what to do with, and I just wish he could be able to overcome this. And we love our son so much, like we want the best for him. And I'm not saying autism is sad or a bad diagnosis, but just like everything like kind of just compounded down together, and it was hard.
There is no degree of preparation that you can possibly perform which will guarantee a pitfall-free adoption, particularly when dealing with systems which may not be subject to the same scrutiny that you find at home. The Stauffers had multiple opportunities to stop and pay attention to the advice that they had been given, to actually carefully evaluate the condition of their son and act accordingly. In my opinion, they did not.
But all I want to say is,
I'm bonding with my kid. I'm doing what I'm doing. We put our lives on social media, and I'm not gonna have people sit there and treat me like a fool because I'm not gonna take it. I'm not the kind of person that just takes stuff, and that's fine.
Myka Stauffer's channel committed to presenting a profile of this mother who is ready to make a difference, who believed that as long as you dig deep, there is nothing that cannot be achieved. This may be true to an extent, but sometimes digging deep means more than just what you see on inspirational TV dramas. It means education, it means analysis, it can even mean changing your own life to accommodate another, and there was clearly too much Myka had established previously that she was not ready to give up. Myka wanted to introduce her son to the Stauffer life, but that's not a membership everyone is cut out for. Yet, in spite of this, the channel's uploads appeared to portray their new son as coping with the sometimes chaotic lifestyle very aptly, even if this sometimes meant unhealthy coping mechanisms. This was echoed in interviews where Myka regularly emphasized that in spite of the challenges, the son wasn't excessively disruptive, and Myka had found it to be a rewarding experience in itself. To audience members, it appears that this gamble had paid off. Contrast this to the police report, which framed their relationship as under severe strain and presenting the son's condition as completely out of control and portraying him as a ruffian. It felt like they were talking about two different children. With such conflicting messages, many accused the Stauffers of omitting and exaggerating details of their convenience to construct an image which justified their perspective when it suited them. Most couldn't see this as being a sudden shift. Even if you consider the fact that the child's condition had worsened in such a time period, it would be very out of character for a parent to legitimately give up on a child who they had nurtured for years on the basis of a few turbulent months, for a condition that they understand and acknowledge. So this begs the question that many have asked: what happened? Why the inconsistencies? Let's talk theory. The first theory is more sympathetic, though still quite critical. We'll call it the denial theory. This is the one that Myka appears to appeal to in her Instagram statement. The denial theory dictates that the challenges with the son in question had actually been more prevalent than they had been represented as on the channel. And in interviews, Myka tried to excuse the problems in an attempt to prove those who doubted her wrong and to try and show that she was ready for the challenge. However, she was ill-equipped and the environment wasn't appropriate for the child, but she was too set in her ways, and it wasn't until these problems became even more apparent where she had to swallow her pride and realize she was not cut out for this job. This is supported by evidence of Myka's own concessions of existing behavioral issues over the years, and even private posts which appeared to show that there were basic elements that she was struggling to cope with in the past few years. However, with this in mind, many would argue that these posts also reflect a more cynical theory, given how one in particular appears to prioritize optics over truth. So let's talk about the clout theory. This theory adopts the belief that the Stauffers took in a child with the intent to profit off their plight. Adopting children from abroad was already shown to amplify traffic and bolster channels, and Myka, well known for appealing to her subscriber base, sought to capitalize on this trend. She would subsequently publicize and monetize all content relating to his adoption and home life, with the motivation of pandering to people's optimistic nature and the romanticized notions they held about adopting children. However, over time, the cost of maintaining this brand was exceeding the profit, and as the returns dwindled and their child remained financially demanding, the parents decided that his presence was no longer advantageous and decided to end this journey. This is obviously supported by some of the evidence that we have already discussed, which demonstrate a clear consciousness of one's public image, but also a lot of behavioral patterns that seem to be present in their content, most accentuated by their shockingly bad announcement video, which appeared to be focused around preserving people's perception of themselves once more. The police report didn't flatter Myka either, with the confession that the duct tape incident occurred all because she wasn't prepared to spend a couple $100 more on a new one. On the other hand, given the cost of adoption and the subsequent complications, it seems like a pretty hefty investment to sink in, without the guarantee of returns. And even if the formula had worked on other channels, there was no assurance that it would work here. On top of this, if they had enough money to sink into an adoption, even with the donations, it would be a strange pursuit for the sole purpose of wealth. Would it have really been worth it? There must have been some personal sacrifice, right? It's hard to look at the situation and not at least consider that Myka was far too preoccupied with how people looked at her, to the point where it often felt like she prioritized that above the well-being of those who she purported to care about. She may have been set in her ways and in denial to an extent. I don't doubt there was a degree of ignorance, but it also feels like the conceptual benefits of having such a child on a YouTube channel corrupted her decision-making. When other people told her it was wise to provide the son with a more appropriate environment, she turned a blind eye, proudly proclaiming her defiance, only falling back on expert opinion when it suited her agenda. Whether that agenda was more cost-motivated or family-motivated, I do not know. Myka references both in the report, and both could be seen as plausible reasons, but I don't think either could fully justify the outcome. She favored the pursuit of this vision of a family over the well-being of a child who had no say, and that was inexcusable. A lot of people have reflected on this situation with the mind that Myka's error was giving up on a child of her own. However, although the decision may have been the catalyst for her critics, the greatest mistake that Myka made was adopting a child in the first place. The police report also disclosed that the adoption was never finalized, which is an optional process in the US. This revelation led many to assert that the Stauffers never planned to keep their adopted son. Although I personally feel this is unlikely given how they hammered in the rhetoric of adoption being forever, it may show they harbored more reservations than they displayed. Or, to be honest, they may not have considered it important, which also may be indicative. Many people asked if Myka would do the same if it was a biological son, and the answer is obviously a resounding no. Well, we hope at least. This was one of the focal points for public opinion, this treatment of a child who they welcomed into their family but similarly gave away. On principle, the outcome is positive. The child is in a better place now. There is no doubt about that. He has a family who are well equipped to deal with his needs, and the Stauffer family are likely relieved of a challenging relationship as well, and hopefully have more time to dedicate it to the rest of their children. However, many can't help but feel displeased by the conclusion because adversity is part of parenting, and that means stepping up to the challenge, not running from it. So, although dissolving the adoption may have been the right decision under the circumstances, it seemed to be an outcome only precipitated by the parents' incompetence.
It is hard. It is not easier with each kid. It does not feel the same. It feels harder with every single child I've had. Every time it's harder because different kids have different emotional needs, and different kids have different needs, and different kids want different things.
As mentioned, adoption is no facile enterprise. When many adopt, it's with the commitment that it is the creation of an inseparable bond which will withstand the challenges that such a venture may throw at you. When you bring a child into your family, people expect you to treat them like your own biological offspring. After all, they are no less human. In a way, Myka did, but she applied the blueprint Stauffer formula, which in her mind had worked with her other children. When it worked with their son, it worked. It was great. When it didn't, well, he clearly just had some learning to do.
Are you done?
He's just having a bad day. He's a grumpy day today.
There is never a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to parenting, and although Myka professed to have understood this eventually, this wasn't reflected enough in her actions. For example, in the police report, Myka remarks that his son would regularly react poorly when his siblings were overwhelming him, retreating to the closet and rocking himself non-stop. Yet Myka still made the decision to have another child, which they gave birth to around mid-2019, which would mean a high-maintenance infant around the house, likely further contributing to a stressful environment for their son. It's these successive poor decisions that could easily aggravate a condition, and to many onlookers it just felt like they were playing Russian roulette with his triggers. Pure theory here. Pure theory. But maybe that's why they took the infant abroad to remove that negative stimulus from the son's life. Myka Stauffer should not have adopted. Not just for that reason, but for a multitude of others. They were not ready for what the child's diagnosis meant, and with the information that the child's disposition was not as expected, they should have thought much harder than they did. Adoptions not going to plan and coming to an end isn't an immensely rare eventuality. It happens in a minority but substantial percentage of adoptions, and I'm sure that many people involved in those have not acted with reckless or selfish will. Sometimes these things don't work out, so I don't want to attack everyone who has ever had to give up an adopted child. But the Stauffers had a window to act and retain their dignity, and that window passed.
Guys, I have to say, you like the fast cars, don't you? I think he's definitely my son, aren't you? Are you my boy? Yeah, you like fast cars too, like rad. It's so cool, guys.
Put the finances aside, put the channel aside, this was for the child. And his position on such a family channel was already debatable, but the revelation that he was suffering from an affliction which directly inhibited his ability to communicate should have been cause for serious rumination. At that point, with the advice of experts, Myka should have made the decision whether to find a more appropriate home for the son or prepare herself to make significant changes to her own life. She chose the third option, which was to press on with the predetermined plans and upping the dosage on the sappy, sentimental, spiritual language of how it was just meant to be.
He's been home for, like I said, almost 2 years, and I don't know what I would do without him. We have hard days. We do. Not every day is easy. When you have a kiddo that has so many wants and desires and wants to like be heard all the time and is strong-willed, you have communication struggles, and some days are just hard. One thing that's changed this year more than ever is I feel like our connection as a family has gotten so profoundly amazing. He is easily one of my favorite people in the entire world.
Myka and James Stauffer will have to live with the ramifications of the decisions they made, even if that only extends to social media. With everything in mind, it's hard to really see how Myka will relaunch her channel. It has remained dormant since the situation, and maybe that's for the best. James's channel remains active and still attracts significant viewership. Whether he will continue to be the sole uploader for the family bread is another question that only time will answer. I'll make this clear, I don't necessarily disagree with showing childhood mental struggles in video form, particularly for educational purposes. There is a lot that one can learn from such a portrayal, but at the same time it needs to be presented fairly and impartially with respect for the child at the center of the spectacle, and that's an aspect that a lot of family channels fall short on, because too often they're more concerned with catering to an image rather than presenting a faithful portrait based on the trials and tribulations that a family under such stress would have to confront. Many asked if Myka Stauffer would have treated a biological son the same way that she treated her adopted son. It's an easy and mostly rhetorical question that does provoke some good discourse at least. However, for me, there was a more interesting question. Would she have done this at all if she didn't have a YouTube channel? And if no, is it okay for an individual to have such a consequential decision riding on the existence of that platform? YouTube influences the creative liberties we take, the decisions we make. That is beyond doubt. But where is the line? Where does YouTube end and real life begin? These are the questions that I'll leave with you today. I hope they are thought-provoking enough, even if they are a little simple.
Do you have a favorite failure, and how has maybe a failure in your life set you up for future success?
So I wouldn't call it a failure, but I would call it something that was really, 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 really challenging. We recently adopted a little guy from China. Definitely not a failure. But when we adopted him, he had a totally different diagnosis than what we were told. We were told that he had a brain tumor, and as a cancer nurse, I was comfortable with that moving forward. And he actually had severe brain damage, severe autism, and some severe delays that may mean that he may live with me for the rest of his life, something that we just literally were not ready for.
A lot of people believe that Myka is a narcissist, and although it's not a discussion that I'm going to have right now, I can't blame them. She'd welcome these interviews which heaped approbation onto her as this selfless Samaritan, embracing this image bestowed unto her through this adoption journey, yet when the tables turned, the best she could do was this.
Do I feel like a failure as a mom? Like 500%.
You get no points for stating the obvious here. Myka had failed. Not for letting her son leave, but for the way the son was treated while he was there. The audience deserved better, the children deserved better, he deserved better. Family channels represent an immovable demographic on the YouTube platform. The influence they have in shaping people's lives is undeniable. But before you put them behind a camera, make sure you put them first. And if you preach the principles of loyalty and commitment, then expect to be held to those standards. And don't be surprised if people are angry if you fail to practice that commitment yourself. Are you constructing a YouTube channel around a family, or a family around a YouTube channel? Maybe that question should have been asked to Myka.
When I started the adoption process, I never really found very much material on what it was like when you get home. And I think that this could be a really cool resource for somebody who's gone through the journey. But once you get home and once you kind of find that perfect niche for your family, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing.
Be aware and make sure you are capable of the challenges you are facing up to. And if you do make a mistake, for Christ's sake, don't make a terrible video about it.
95% of the struggles we have never publicly aired, ever.
What were they thinking?
I just wanna love you, just wanna hold you, just wanna be with you till we grow old. Just tell me you'll stay or take me away. I want you for myself every single day. You set my world on fire. You set my
So yes, guys, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a good time. I'm sure I did. I had a great time. Woo! God, I can't contain my enthusiasm. Anyhow, I want to give a big thanks, extend my gratitude to the fantastic editors for the work they did. Brilliant work, as always, I'm sure. Go check them out. They'll be in the pinned comment, their links. Also want to give big thanks to my patrons. $10 Patreons up on there right now. And a special thanks to my $50 patrons, Sam Hullabaloo, Caroline, Hypercube, Amanda, Devon, and Shiro Chigo. I also want to extend a special thanks to my $100 patrons, Christopher Carras and Ileana Banana. Great name. I love that one. I love that one. And another $100 Patreon, Pokey Siren YT, who has asked for a custom message, which is the first time this has been exercised, but I will happily honor it. And he wants to tell you to go and check out his YouTube channel and provide some constructive criticism. What a lovely, lovely individual. I will leave it alongside his Patreon credit in the pinned comment. Anyhow, my social medias will also be in the pinned comment. I haven't been particularly active recently, but maybe I'll be more active by the time this video is out. Who knows? Otherwise, I don't really have too much else to add, so I hope by the time this is out, we're all a bit more free. It feels right now that even though it's beginning to ease, the tension remains. And I hope that is all lifted off our shoulders soon enough. Send my love to you guys. But until then, I'm The Right Opinion, and I will see you in the next one.